Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I got a video from Michael Sartain that I wanted to react to, and it's called Passport Bros is Just a Cope. So, pretty strong statement from Michael Sartain. Passport Bros movement has been going pretty strong lately, so we're going to see what he has to say about it. What brought this video to my attention was actually an email that I received from a viewer. So, first, we're going to read the email from Darth Sidonius. Shout out to you. Because he brings up some interesting points about the video, and then we're going to go ahead and react to the video. So let's go ahead and get into it. By the way, this is from the This Is Shah official at gmail.com email. And if you guys ever want me to react to anything in particular, you can email me here, and I'll check this and do what I can do. So this is from Darth Sidonius. Hey Shah, I'm actually the one that sent you that video regarding Doug Wilson, watching and reacting to the Whatever podcast. Hope you're doing well. I did see your recent video on Pearl, basically saying conservative culture is not coming back, and it reminded me of something else. I'm sure you have heard a bit about the Passport Bro movement to a degree, which is just men from Western countries leaving and moving to more conservative type cultures for traditional women that are wife material. They will usually accomplish this by either working remotely or finding jobs domestically in such countries. Another reason as well mentioned why they might go this route is the laws are better or don't encourage divorce as much as in other countries. I admit I am actually pursuing this route since even before this took off, currently finishing up a computer science degree, getting a remote tech job, and also getting a master's in AI. The video I mentioned is the following. So that's going to be our Michael Sartain video here. Passport Bros is just a cope. I find this interesting for a few reasons. Number one, guys get tired of the way things are ran in most Western countries due to the laws, for example, and decide they will move elsewhere. But they not only have feminists yelling at them, but also so-called red pill dating coaches call them weak as well. Or in this case, they are nothing but sex pats, apparently. Number two, these same red pill gurus on their shows will complain about modern women, this or that, how bad men in the West have it and how bad the laws are, but as soon as men decide, okay then, I will just go seek opportunities elsewhere, they get annoyed with them. Number three, they literally insult a bunch of women from other countries as if they are just prostitutes or something, as you will see in the video, or simply because you don't speak English, you're uneducated, apparently. Lastly, number four, which is connected to the last 2 points, I might add, and I only really thought about this the last few days. As you will see here in the video, I keep on hearing this argument that makes no sense. As I said, they keep on complaining about modern women and the laws all the time, along with how gynocentric the society is becoming. Though once guys leave to find the non-modern women, I noticed a switch up when they use the argument of, if you can't get women in the United States, then you can't get women anywhere else. It took me a while to notice, but it is putting the modern women on a pedestal. Reason I say this is because they put down that type of woman, but in this case, all of a sudden, the modern woman who acts super feminist and / or acts like a 304, as they like to say sometimes, all of a sudden becomes the standard on which whether you can get a woman or not, and the traditional woman is put on a lower pedestal. It also makes no sense because there are plenty of foreign men from intact families and quite masculine who won't even date in the US, for example, and actually go back to their own countries to get a wife. Are they weak for not wanting to deal with the laws and attitudes? Sorry for the long email, but yeah, I have a lot to say on this topic. I get wanting to change the laws and everything. I hope they do. But for some of us that don't have hope that there will be a major change in our lifetimes, I think we just want to move to where the laws are to our liking and live our lives, not spending the majority of it fighting against major interest groups for change with no guarantee it will change before we die. I might add to, before I leave, if you look at the comments on the video, even guys who used to support Sartain said this was a very bad take and called them out on it. All right, here it is. Passport Bros is just a cope.
But first, let's just start with a simple definition. What is a passport bro in your
Okay,
eyes?
there's kind of 2 definitions I've seen. For me, the definition is you are going to a place where there is little middle class, maybe like poverty. So you have a high level of poverty and a disproportionately high level of attractive women. So the 3 main places I would think about this is Colombia, probably Ukraine in that area. So like maybe Romania, that area, parts of Poland, and then Southeast Asia. So maybe like Singapore or places like that. Well, Singapore's not poor, but like certain poorer places like Vietnam would be an example.
Yeah.
So basically places where you will also see sex tourism. So where you see sex tourism, you're also going to see passport bros. A guy who's like, for instance, Hispanic going to Australia, and then all the Australian girls like, ooh, you look different than our guys, and they want to have sex with them. That's not a passport bro to me. Just going like a guy who goes to a first world country, like for instance, you grab your passport and you go to Sweden because you want a blonde haired, blue eyed woman that you want to date. Those people have a middle class. And so those women are not going to be able, or not going to just up and leave for a green card like they might do in Medellin or they might do in you know, Ho Chi Minh City or whatever. Like it's very different environment. So to me, my definition for passport bro is you're going to a place with almost no middle class, where women have very little upward financial mobility and a disproportionately high level of attractive women.
Typically, what at least the argument for passport bros in terms of why they jump ship here and leave to a different country is that the women here are not living by a traditional standard, and that they're leaving to a country where the women are born and bred to be traditional.
That's a fantastic definition, because every now and then I get accused of being a passport bro. And I know we haven't spoken too much prior to just getting on here, but I lived in Mexico years ago, almost 20 years ago. I studied abroad down here, studied at a very good university, didn't realize it at the time. Did my corporate career thing in California, got locked down in the pandemic, and then decided, you know what, I'll just come back to Mexico because I'm already pretty well established here. I have a good network of people, and it's never really felt foreign to me. But the passport bro thing didn't exist 20 years ago when I first came down. So now I'll run into other gringos or other expats, and they'll say, oh, you're one of those passport bro guys. I'm like, dude, I've been doing Mexico since before Google existed. I don't know what you're talking about. So I love that idea of that it has the very small middle class and then that income disparity. I think that's a key factor. And then even where I'm at in Mexico City, I'm in a pretty nice neighborhood. You don't really see sex tourism. Most of the girls I date are usually actually, to be honest, higher class than I am. A lot of times as a gringo, you come down thinking, oh, I'm gonna have the ladies swooning over me, and then you get going out with them. You're like, no, they come from better families than I do even. So
Yeah.
What would the difference be in your eyes between, for example, a passport bro, an expat, and a digital nomad?
So yeah, a digital nomad who goes to Tulum. Tulum's more fucking expensive than the United States. That's definitely not a passport bro. And most of the girls you'd be hooking up with there are either American or fucking European that are visiting Tulum. So that's when I see digital nomads, the number one spot for me I see is Tulum, like Mexico City. I'll see them sometimes in Medellin or like maybe Dubai or places like that. You'll see it maybe Sweden, sometimes Puerto Rico because of the 4% federal tax rate. You'll see places like that. That is just a function where you just want to travel and you can live anywhere you want, so you choose to do that. To me, by the way, any digital nomad who doesn't live in Vegas, I just don't understand why. It's better here than any of those places I just mentioned. So that's the first thing. The expat is, again, it's for financial gain. So for instance, the Emiratis, the royal family in the Emirates, their family members actually fly the fighter jets that the the UAE, United Arab Emirates royal family owns. So they actually have an air force in UAE. The guys who maintain those jets are usually former U.S. Air Force Air Force maintainers, and those guys get paid $400,000 a year to go work on jets and maintain them in another country. A lot of people have these cool jobs where they work on oil rigs, or they might work as, they just have like maybe even an English teacher. There's a bunch of different cool jobs that you can get in other countries where you're an expat, or you may just like live in like Koh Samui, Thailand, where it's super, super inexpensive to live. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you have like a couple $100,000 saved up, and you realize you can just live there for the rest of your life because there's an arbitrage in wealth. That's what an expat would do. A passport bro is different. A passport bro is a situation where it's like, your initial reasoning for leaving is because the women in this country are not facilitating what you want. And that could be like, again, it's realistic. Are women getting bad advice from Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion to be a bad bitch and be like extremely difficult to deal with? Yes, that's true for sure. Are modern Western women very, difficult to lock down and have a long-term relationship with? Yes, the science, the data would show that is correct. And then from that, your personal anecdotal experience shows you, okay, well, I'm not having a ton of a success with dating, so let me go to this other place. And then you say, well, these people have more traditional values. But the problem is you can go to places with more traditional values, but those women still aren't going to fuck you. But in Colombia, they will. You know what I'm saying? And in places like that, they will. And so that's the issue. It's like there needs to be this added incentive. And I think we kind of ignore this. There's an incentive for the woman to have a better life by leaving with the dude who has a more upward financial mobility and a U.S. passport. And so,
it's interesting that he says that, because a lot of the passport bro videos and, the guys who kind of showcase their lives, the claim is that they don't run into that issue. I understand the reasoning of, if you are not good with women here, then very possibly you're not good with women anywhere. But what they report is something quite different, in that the attitudes of the women are very different. They're a lot more agreeable, and their experiences in general are not exactly what Michael Sartain is portraying it as. It's one thing about how the women are out here, but also the laws are a certain thing out here. And I think he's kind of assuming most of them are going there with the goal of also bringing them back, which is a very different scenario from going there and staying there.
That's what's going on there. And I think to act like that's not going on is naive, right? That is part of this whole thing. Does even the guy who was promoting Passport Fellas, which is the app, on my show yesterday, he even admitted, he's like, yeah, there probably is some sex trafficking going on with regards to this. And that's one of the dangers that are going on. It's like one of these situations where Colombia's poor. No matter what we do, Colombia is going to be poor. The women there, the situation they're in is that they're going to be in a better situation if they do this than don't do this. So are you trafficking? Yes. But like the thing is, well, someone was going to do it anyway, so it might as well be us. And these guys want to look for a good wife and yada, yada, yada. I have a buddy of mine who lives there, and he like only dates super young girls, like 19, 20-year-old girls in Colombia, because he goes, once they get to 21, if they're hot and they don't have a job, they're kind of like forced into this like sex trade, and it's really bad at that point. So he's like, dude, you got to get them young. That's what he told me. I'm not advising anyone do this, but he lives in Medellin.
I don't know if that's what they're doing or what they're not doing. Obviously, the claim is that they're going out there and dating and ostensibly getting married and doing all these kinds of things that they can't do out here. That's what I watch for with the passport bros, especially the ones who really sell it. It's one thing if the women out here aren't traditional, and then you're going to a place where they are traditional. But it's also funny if the passport bro goes out there and then just starts living the life of an American playboy style, where he just wants to go through a bunch of chicks instead of actually doing the traditional thing of getting married. That being said, I mean, there's some stuff at the end of the video that I want to talk about, because I worked at a child support agency for 5 years, and I saw a lot of foreign cases, and I saw cases of guys who, either went there and brought a woman back, or they went there and the woman stayed there with the kids. But something, that the passport bros don't exactly know is, like, the child support agency in California can still kind of get involved in your life, even if you're doing stuff out there. But we'll talk more about that later in the video.
And so from that standpoint, that's essentially what I'm saying is, like, for those of you who say I'm not in favor of passport bros, I'm not. I actually think it's kind of a cope. If it gets to an actual point where it's like you just really want a Catholic girl and you're really into Hispanic women and you are legitimately looking for a wife, and in the interim you don't fuck 15 prostitutes, then I could definitely see that like as maybe being the case. Going to another country to find someone better, hey, that makes sense.
The other side of that coin, though, is that what he's selling, which is the self-improvement, narrative. The self-improvement thing is also a cope. If the passport bros is a cope, then the self-improvement thing has to be a cope. Because if you, on the one hand, admit that the modern women here are delusional and not, worthy of the traditional stuff, and they demand too high of a price, and then on the other hand, also prescribing that men need to self-improve in order to meet the standards of those women that they also call delusional, that also is a cope.
Why does the manosphere spend so much time on self-improvement and men grooming themselves to please toxic women that just want to use them and bring nothing to the table?
I think it's all about the chase. It has a lot to do with where you're at in your life. Some people feel like, I want something better, so I'm going to keep sculpting on myself. Maybe it will attract someone that is better in my mind at the gym or, stuff like that.
Well, self-improvement can't be the answer to the modern woman problem. If we've got guys who have finished that mission and made it to the other end, and they're still ended up with the same women problems. I mean, the saying goes, more bitches, more problems.
Why are we catering to women's preferences who don't have good values?
Because they're hot sometimes.
How is that not just creating more simps?
It is, but at the same time, that's the world we live in, and you got to get used to it. If you want more whatever, you're gonna get more simps.
How is that not just creating more simps?
Shit, it is creating more simps. Now that I think about it.
It is creating more simps. It is, man. And just a bunch of fools who are about to get their heart broken. You know what I mean? Realistically, you know, because it's ill-gotten. It's fictitious means. You know what I mean? It's all fake. It's just a facade. You know what I mean? It's not really you. Or if you strip away all that, what you have, then what are you really? You know what I mean? Are they gonna mess with you then? I doubt it. You know what I mean?
But like what I will say, the majority of the passport bro thing is, it's a cope. You want cheap prostitutes, you go to other countries to find them, then you fuck them, and then occasionally you might bring one home. But when you do, she didn't really have any other options but to leave with you.
You know, and it's funny because the majority of the passport bros are average guys that are going to a place where ideally the price that it costs that they have to be as far as how successful they gotta be is they can be an average person who finds a woman who is traditional that they can hopefully start a life with. But he's relating it straight to prostitutes, which I think is a bit disingenuous. And if you're going to say they're going to go over there and have sex with 15 prostitutes until there's one that they bring back home who really didn't have another choice, how different is that from the self-improvement guys who are having sex and trading essentially their resources in order to bed these modern women, and then eventually, I guess he would be suggesting settling down with one of these delusional modern women. How different is that from prostitution? Anyways, I think you have a better chance on the passport bros route of finding someone who's actually traditional and maybe avoiding this whole sex tourism thing versus staying here and trying to self-improve for the sake of impressing the quote-unquote modern women who, you know, the red pill gurus associate with prostitute-like behavior anyways.
That's the majority of it. I'm not saying it's 100%, but that is what the majority of is. Again, these guys who are in Colombia talking about, hey, I built a harem in Colombia and let me teach you how. I'm very, very skeptical of that shit, and I would not take that course.
And you know what the majority of self-improvement guys over here are? They're guys who sit here and get money and then go on seekingarrangements.com to finance some sugar baby's life, and then they say they got a harem, but they're still paying for it. It's the same thing. They're just paying a higher price. He is going to be against the passport bro stuff because, I mean, he's selling the self-improvement mantra. Here's his YouTube channel. If you click on the description, this is going to be his site. Single guys, give me 7 days and I'll show you how to meet signed models and attend the VIP only events in your city, even if you're not rich or famous. And then we got a pop-up. Enter your info below and I'll send you a one-pager on how to have a rockstar social network. And then right here with the asterisks, if you are not trying to meet incredible women, leave immediately. I just think this is funny because anytime you criticize a guy who's selling the self-improvement thing, they're always like, you don't do it for the women. You know, you do it for yourself. You do it for yourself. But right here on the website, you know, if you are not trying to meet incredible women, leave immediately. And they're selling it, you know, for the same reason. And I get it. You know, it's a business thing. The passport bros are a different thing. And he wants to sell his course. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in Mexico City, and I find that my dating life, granted, there is a bit of an uptick just because you have the whole foreign thing. I live in a nice neighborhood. There is that financial arbitrage, but Mexico City's getting expensive too. In the area I live, it's cheaper than California, but it's about where California was 10, 15 years ago. It's not like a Colombia. It's not like a Thailand. And I've noticed that a lot of gringos come in and out of here. They don't usually last long, and they come with that mindset, okay, just by virtue of being a foreigner, I'm going to just be rolling in pussy. And that's not usually how it works. I've found that personally, my dating life
else,
here,
they will.
Yeah.
If they go somewhere else, these other places, they will. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Colombia before, but in Colombia, you always have to watch your back, and you will meet these beautiful girls, or you'll go to a club, say you're vibing her, you're having a good conversation. I speak Spanish, by the way. I went to college down here in Mexico, and and you think you're having a legit pull or a legit interaction, and then it's time to go home and she says something like, oh, $100, or oh, hey, it's going to cost you, and you're like, what are you talking about? You thought this was a legit conversation. I've noticed that doesn't happen too much where I live in Mexico, but there are plenty of guys, as you mentioned, that do come down here. They think it's going to be an easy time, and you do have that exception, as you alluded to. When I was in college down here, I went to a private school, so a lot of religious guys came down. They started dating a girl in college, spent their whole time there, and then took the girl back to their home country, and they're still married to this day. But that's a very small exception. I think a lot of guys come abroad.
There are millions of people that brought somebody back from Vietnam or South Korea. That happened. Like, I'm not discounting that. These people were in love, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is the extreme example of the people who go to those fucking bars where there's girls like, fucking for $150 and then claiming to be passport bros. So like, try to find a good wife. If you're going like there's a difference between passport bros and sex tourism, but a lot of people who are claiming to be passport bros are actually sex tourists.
And I will give him that. Obviously there are people who go there for sex tourism, and that's always been a thing. And maybe there's some people who are claiming one thing, and that's what they're doing. But honestly, the guys who fly there to get sex tourism, they're probably doing the same thing here regardless. And the passport bros movement is relatively new, at least in this iteration. I think to kind of write most of them off like that is a bit disingenuous.
There's a lot of overlap too. I know I see that you have an armed services background, so I'm sure you've done plenty of traveling to all sorts of countries, good and bad and everything in between. And there's a class system in a lot of these countries, so you'll get a lot of guys that come in. A lot of the new foreigners, fresh over the border, so to speak. Sometimes it's weird considering myself a foreigner, but you'll see that there are the gringo bars where the gringos go there. They don't have to speak any Spanish, and there are girls there looking for gringos, and they do kind of straddle that line. Maybe it's not explicitly sex tourism, but it's the lower class of girls. So, and you see guys, this happens to them all the time. I went out with some buddies last night where poor guy, not really experienced, doesn't really have a much kind of dating experience in the US, and I met this really cool girl, and then turns out other foreigners are kind of passing the girl around. So I always make sure in my group of friends we're kind of more game aware, but one part of our conversation, we'll pull out our phones like, hey, I'm talking to this girl, I see you follow her, is anyone fucking around with her? Is she a communal girl? What kind of girl is she? And we just want to make sure, we call them the community chicks. In college, we used to call them the house hoes. Like if you're ever in a frat or anything, the girls that they're always there, and they're just kind of with whoever's around at that point. In your estimation, is there a specific profile of a passport bro? Because I've always heard that if you can't do well dating wise in the US, you probably shouldn't go abroad. I would definitely agree with that. I did well in California. I do a little better in Mexico just because the girls are a little more feminine, and there's more of that dichotomy between male female kind of relationships and roles that are played in relationships. But for the most part, I found that it wasn't until my game got good in the U.S. that I could really start doing some damage abroad.
That in itself kind of admits that the quality of women, in terms of women who are more traditional, can better be found overseas than here. However, at the same time, it's not about the long-term prospect of getting married with these guys, at least the gentleman on the left. It's going there to live that Playboy lifestyle. So it's like you're kind of contributing to the problem, right? I mean, the women out here are participating in hookup culture, and really, these guys are going out there in order to try to live this dream fantasy life of being the Playboy, and then start doing the same stuff that they want to do out here, but that they're just not doing. But then there is other people who are not doing that and are going out there to ideally find someone to marry and start a family with.
Yes. Listen, is there a point at which you're just not having any success and you might want to try going to another place? I agree with that. But my point is, here's the analogy. Have you ever met the guys in pickup who do day game all the time, just day game in the fucking mall all the time? And then you ask them, hey, do you want to go to a nightclub? And they don't want to go to a nightclub because it's too loud. It's like, if you're doing day game because it's an added part of your life or something you're trying to explore, that's fine. If you're doing day game because you're afraid of going to a nightclub, that's a cope. You're using it as a crutch, and you're not getting any better with women. It's the same type of situation here. Like if it's a situation where you've tried everything, you met a bunch of girls, they're just all disloyal, but you do understand attraction triggers. You do understand how to maintain boundaries. You understand how to break rapport. You understand how to create dread. You understand how pre-selection works. You understand how to be a leader of men. You understand these concepts in order to trigger attraction in women, and you're still dissatisfied, and then you want to go find a wife somewhere else, totally fine with that. But that's not mostly what I see. That's not mostly what I see. What I see is guys who are overweight, who could definitely lose the weight, guys that are, poor, who could definitely do things to improve their financial stability. And those are the ones that are going to these other countries for basically, financial arbitrage or dating arbitrage. And that's what's going on.
The one thing that I can acknowledge here is needing to understand how to deal with women wherever you are. And the analogy I always told myself, which is kind of related to this, but it's different, is that I would much rather learn how to deal with women while I don't have any money than learning how to deal with women after I've gotten rich. I'm a normal guy, and I've dated a good amount of women, enough to be able to be grateful for some of the lessons I've learned. Whilst I'm not a passport bro, but I think both of these guys are erroneously conflating passport bros with sex tourism. The guy speaking with Michael is by definition a passport bro. He's acclimatized himself in Mexico, speaks the language, and is ostensibly doing well. So just to make sure I'm following this correctly, what he is saying is that by going somewhere where I am capable of getting what I want and desire, I am coping because I cannot get it here. In addition, the women overseas are only with me because of my money and green card. Okay, let us say for the sake of argument that this is 100% true 100% of the time. How is this any different than Western women that majority only want me for my money anyway? Because now it seems the only difference is one of the two options I actually get what I want in exchange for having to do what I'm going to have to do as a man anyway. That's kind of like what I was saying earlier, like as if the way he's describing the women over there and then comparing that description with how he describes modern women over here, it's like, okay, if the women over there are traditional in some way, then it's still worth it. Superiority complex, and this is beyond disrespectful. Unsubscribe, get your passports immediately, gentlemen. Sartain himself says there is no middle class in dating anymore in the West because of social media. You can't decry the lack of middle class abroad and then sell coaching domestically for exactly the same phenomenon. Pick a lane. These guys are 40, no kids, no marriage, and telling you guys how to find capable mates. One guy in Mexico, the other guy 40, dating a 20-year-old Miami chick. Get your passport, bros. Don't buy their course. While I'm sure there are a portion of men who look for love abroad because they don't want to put in the effort to better themselves, saying that anyone who does go abroad is just coping is just ignorant. There are a significant amount of them that have put in the time and effort to better themselves and realize that these Western women are not worth it. So they go somewhere else to find the traits that they value in a woman. Michael, that's not a passport bro. A passport bro is a guy that's leaving westernized women and culture. You're trying to make it seem like passport bros are exploiting women from poor countries, typically red pill grifter, doing anything to sell his dating course. Did you know Japan was a passport bro destination, a country that is more safe and civilized than America? It's simple. A passport bro is a guy that's leaving the westernized women and culture for better gains. Doesn't matter if the country is rich or poor. When you leave the West USA and UK, the women in other countries don't say you must be 6 feet tall and drive a Lambo. Fellas, get your passport. There's two situations fundamentally. There's the first situation where the guy goes overseas and then brings over a woman back. Okay. Then there's the other situation where the guy goes overseas and then, he's kind of back and forth, and maybe the woman in the family he's making stays over there. And I'll give you a few cases that I ran into while I was working at the agency. I remember one, and I remember talking to this woman. She was a Thai woman, and she was probably like 21 or 22, and she had a baby. You know what I mean? The kid was young, and I can see the birth dates of the participants in the computer. This woman, she was in her 20s. She was younger than me, okay? And the man was in his 50s, and he was an attorney here in the U.S., and you know what I mean? He brought her back here, and then pretty soon she was in the office, and she had I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was her caretakers or whatever that were kind of helping her with the case. But, she left the attorney guy. They were getting divorced or whatever, and she was in there to collect her child support, and that's that. This guy's an attorney here, ostensibly does well over here. I mean, and I know he did because I can see his income and all that kind of stuff. And she fleeced him. She got him good, basically. So that's an example of bringing someone over here. Another example of leaving someone over there, I saw this with a Filipino woman. And what happened here is the guy worked here, but the woman lived in the Philippines and never came here. You know what I mean? But she was able to get into contact with the child support agency here in California, and we were able to get a judgment for child support against that guy, and we were sending American dollars with the California guideline calculator, as if she lived here and needed that money, because that's the calculator we use. This was the jurisdiction we filed it in, and we were sending that money overseas to her in the Philippines. So that guy got taken care of. Okay, that's an example of leaving someone over there. I saw a similar case like that with a woman from Brazil also. And then there was another case. This one my coworker told me about. He was older than me and he'd seen a lot more stuff. But this was another one. I think this one might have been the Marine. I'm not sure. But this was another woman from the Philippines, and he brought her here, and they were getting divorced, and she barely spoke English, didn't have any skills. And the judge ordered lifetime alimony because he's like, well, you brought her here, so deal with that. There are obviously risks that can be taken. If you're going to try to avoid some of that, if you're going to go there and you're going to start your family there, the only way the child support agency can get you here is if you have to come back here for work and they're able to serve you documents here. Because if they can serve you within wherever the jurisdiction is, then they can actually bring a case. And if your employment is based in the U.S., where, you know, the agency can send an income withholding order, they can get the judgment, then they can start garnishing against you, no matter where you are. You know, especially if you're remote working, that's the dream for a lot of these folks. So those are things to be careful of. You know, is it likely to happen? Maybe not so much, because maybe not so many people are educated in that, especially over there. But, you know, with social media and as time goes on, everyone's going to be catching on. The people over there are going to be catching on too. They see this stuff. These shorts are going viral everywhere and all these kinds of things. And people are getting smarter. You know, it's always cat and mouse. Dart Sidonius did send another email because I asked him if I can get permission to read his emails online. And he actually sent me a second email that had an old article from Return of Kings, which is a very old forum, which was like pre-Red Pill subreddit days. And what's funny is one of these articles, it's from like, I think it's from like 2013. It's old. It's like a decade old. But it did reference a lot of studies that followed couples that brought brides from overseas here. And it actually, what you saw in the studies was that there is a higher chance of your marriage staying together and working if you actually brought a foreign bride here than if you married a local woman, which was surprising because the stereotype is always that the mail order bride is going to screw you over and everything. This is the old forum. This is on the Wayback Machine, but this looks like February 15th, 2013, and Return of Kings. This is like before my time. I remember the Red Pill subreddit. That came around like 2012-ish. And it looks like prior to that, you had Return of Kings. And, you know, this is kind of where a lot of the early days of this stuff was getting figured out. And I know it goes back even further, but that's before my time. So let's go and just read this. This is saying, don't believe the lies about foreign brides. I'm not going to read this whole thing here, but I'm just going to go to where the studies are cited. So here's one, and this is from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, reports that marriages arranged through mail order bride services would appear to have a lower divorce rate than the nation as a whole. Fully 80% of these marriages having lasted over the years for which reports are available. Now keep in mind, this data is at least 10 years old. This one was pretty interesting. The next study was conducted in Switzerland. So let me just read what came out of the Swiss paper. The Statistical Office of Switzerland has published some more detailed statistics. Note that to draw any conclusions, the divorce rate of mail order marriages must be compared to the divorce rate of domestic marriages. In 1999, the divorce rate for domestic marriages, Swiss married to Swiss, in Switzerland were at a record high of 50%. That's crazy that it was already 50% over there back in 99. In the same year, marriages with foreigners are comparatively better. Marriages between Swiss and German or Italian women have a comparatively better divorce rate, 40%. Marriages between Brazilian or Thai women and Swiss turned out to be more durable than expected. The divorce rate reached the low rate of 30%. Fantastically low divorce rates were reached at marriages with women from Colombia, 20%. That's very interesting. Marriages with women from the former USSR reached a rate of 15%. However, it must be noted that marriages between Swiss and Russians boom at the moment, and that the divorce rate is not that much meaningful because the divorce rate rises with the time lag. However, there are also marriages between Swiss and foreigners where the divorce rate is worse than the domestic rate. Marriages between Swiss and women from the Dominican Republic tend to work very badly. The divorce rate reached catastrophic 60%. Similarly, but not quite as bad, the divorce rate in marriages between Swiss and Philippine women reaches 45%. Another funny thing is that it also says, ironically, they also track the divorce rate between Swiss women and foreign men, which clocks in at 80% failure rates. So that's kind of funny because the men bringing over foreign women have a higher chance of marital success, but when the Swiss women married foreign men, it was the opposite. There was more of a chance that it wasn't going to work, and it's actually better if they married men domestically. So that's interesting. So let's take a look at Darth Sidonius' second email. I brought that up, and he's referring to the article we just looked at. I brought that up because I do remember from my research a long time ago regarding the whole mail order bride thing that was going on. I remember it was bigger in the 90s and early 2000s, which was kind of the reversal of Passport Bros. I know with Passport Bros, you want to leave the country you're at and set roots in a country where the laws and culture are better and less toxic. For the mail order brides movement, men just talked with women over in a particular country and brought them back to, say, the US. The article above actually deals with that situation because it was made way before things got even more toxic in a lot of Western countries. I think it's important, though, and I'm curious if you've noticed something similar with cases you've seen. The main point of it being that the divorce rate between a man in the US and a foreign woman seems to hover around the 20% mark, which is less than half of the 50% or more divorce rate in the US even back then. I think this is important because even though now the idea is to not bring a foreign woman here, it does throw a wrench in another argument I see certain PUA or dating coaches types use. It's the whole women are the same everywhere around the world. My question is, we have this data, so how are foreign women exactly carbon copies of the local women if they aren't divorcing their husbands at the exact same rate? And that's an interesting question. I mean, one of the truisms thrown around is, all women are like that, or, hypergamy this and hypergamy that. But you do have to question how much, nature, versus nurture plays a role, and being brought up in a traditional society affects what happens, practically or on the ground. And according to the statistics, Darth Sidonius is presenting here, is that the foreign women being brought back here do have a better chance of marital success. Also, from my knowledge, the data is taken from marriages at least 10 years old. It takes 3 years of being here, married to an American, then you get your green card. So you can't even use the green card argument because 80% of these women are still married to their husbands up to the 10-year mark at least. Personally, I still wouldn't go this route myself, mainly because if I have kids, I don't want my sons to have to feel bad or discouraged because they are men, or my daughters to give into this degenerate type culture thinking she needs to keep sleeping with hot guys and hope they commit to her. However, if some guys want to go this route, at least 20% divorce rate is much lower than the domestic rate. As for why I think certain red pill gurus get this wrong, it's because they literally take the human nature is the same everywhere argument, which really is human nature as seen by the red pill, and extrapolate that to every single other culture. The problem is, yes, there are social hierarchies in every culture, but the way you move within those social hierarchies can be anywhere from similar to, say, the US to completely different. No one would say the way you get a woman in the US is the same way you would get a woman in, say, Saudi Arabia. More than anything, if you tried the same things, you would find yourself either deported or in very big trouble. There are other pressures on human behavior besides just human nature. There is culture, and there is also the laws to put limits on the more negative aspects of human nature. Bringing someone back over here could be a ticking time bomb, and the culture will always act as a corrosive acid to kind of transform the people that you're bringing back to, essentially become like the people are here. Most of the passport bros, in my opinion, don't go there to bring a woman back here. At least from what I've seen, they tend to go there and stay there. And that is kind of a reversal from the mail order bride phenomenon, which is what we used to see. It's like there were mail order brides, and then there was people who would just go for sex tourism. The passport bros are new because they're people who are just leaving to go over there ostensibly to find someone that's traditional. It's better to stay there because then you're in a jurisdiction where the laws would protect, both parties' interests in the divorce, whether it's the masculine or the feminine role. Now, there are other challenges with being a passport bro. I mean, it's easier for people who go back to a country that they have cultural roots in. You can go there, you can better assimilate, the language. It also works for citizenships and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? You can get, if your parents are from somewhere, you can get certain rights to where you can own property and have bank accounts there, where other people, they can't, avail themselves of similar things. So those are challenges you're going to run into. And then also keep in mind that, depending on where you work, if your money's coming from the US and you have to come back here frequently, you could get caught up in the family law and child support system. It's entirely possible, and I've seen it happen. So it's not a complete safe haven. However, the way Michael Sartain is talking is that, like, okay, you're going to Colombia or Thailand and you're meeting women that are already, on the prostitute track, and they've already been ran through by all these guys and they're sleeping with all these guys, and you're choosing one of them to be your wife. I take issue with that because ostensibly the passport bros are going there to meet women who are traditional and then get married to them. Now, what I think is disingenuous about the passport bros is if they're going to leave there, but then pull all the same F-boy stuff that they're doing here to survive in a climate of, essentially feminist modern women. But it's like, then you go to the traditional places, you find the young women, you turn them out, you don't marry them. Then it's a little strange, because basically what that is just taking out resentment that you've built up over the years. And it's just kind of like a tit for tat. I'm going to sleep with a bunch of women now here, and then later on I'll get married. But that's only, destroying the market out there, if we're being honest. And to take it further, with Michael Sartain saying that, the women are prostitutes or this and that, it's really not that different of a situation here, because if he's coaching men to date women that are modern women out here, those same women, I mean, no matter if they're young or not, most of them have already been going through the system, so to speak. They've been starting from a young age in high school all the way up. And I mean, they have similar body counts to probably these women in other countries, if we're going to believe that the passport bros are just messing with these types of women. So, I mean, listen, if the passport bros is a cope, then so is the self-improvement grift. The problem here basically is that there is no true long-term solution so long as the laws don't get overhauled. And I understand what Darth Sidonius is saying. He's trying to figure it out, because he's just like, these laws aren't going to get changed in my lifetime. What is the best bet for me to do? And I hear where you're coming from that. But, even if you self-improve here, the Michael Sartain way, you can't fully invest into a woman without being subject to the laws. What you see with a lot of these men who do become high value, eventually their marriages fail just the same, and they get dragged through the courts. They become a high value target, as Coach Greg Adams likes to say. And he spends his whole channel, and I do it here too, because I like to look at child support cases, and you go over notable cases, Tyrese Gibson, all these guys. But I think the red pill types are going to be like, no, I mean, they didn't take my course. They were just blue pilled. That's why they let this happen. But if you take the Michael Sartain course and you become red pilled and you understand, dread game and alpha and all these things he was listing in his video, you still can't sign on the dotted line to get married. If you get someone pregnant and you have a kid, you are now at the mercy of the divorce courts, the child support agencies, and all this kind of stuff. And you can't hold masculine frame forever. You can't hold dread game forever. And that's just the way the game is going to be played out here. So there is no long-term solution. I do hope and pray, Darth Sidonius, that you are successful on your path, and that you finish that master's degree I think you said you were working on, and get that awesome remote tech job. I think you're going to find a ton of amazing women out there in the world, and I don't think that they're all prostitutes, and wherever you decide to get settled, man, I hope it works out. I admire your zeal and your willingness to try. And again, I think a lot of this red pill stuff has been kind of commandeered or hijacked by a lot of these self-improvement guys. And here's some red pill history for you guys. So that article was from Return of the Kings, okay? And there was this guy on there, Roosh V, and when the red pill subreddit started taking off, basically there was a clash between red pill and this Roosh V guy who was like this OG pickup artist dude. So here's a really old thread from 9 years ago, and it says Roosh V slams the red pill. And basically what happened is that Roosh V came out and said that he started disagreeing with the red pill. And it's funny because I remember I used to peruse these forums back in the day, specifically the subreddit. I didn't know about Return of the Kings or any of this. I would only hear it referenced on these subreddits. But I just remember the only thing I heard about him was that he was just this guy who developed some of this stuff and was good at it, and then he kind of turned into like tradcon traditional or something, and that was the last I heard of him. I don't even know if that's right, but looking back, I get the idea now that this guy saw years ago what was wrong with the red pill, and I think he was able to surmise that there was no long-term solution, and that essentially the red pill is missing something. And I found an old article from him which I thought's pretty interesting. So this is another old archive site, and it says neo-masculinity receives mainstream recognition. That's on Infowars.com. I don't know if that was mainstream back then. I doubt it. But here's Roosh V, and this is one of his posts, and he says, in case you missed it, I previously laid out the principal doctrines of neo-masculinity. Now, neo-masculinity seems to be some kind of brand that he was selling, and it was clashing with red pill. And red pill was more of this open source sort of thing where everyone's sharing their experiences versus the more centralized neo-masculinity put forth from Roosh V. Essentially, the red pill guys are like, this Roosh V guy is just out here just trying to profit, which might have been true because red pill subreddit did serve as competition for what he was putting out there. But let's read what he has to say. The recognition of neo-masculinity by a large outlet reaffirms to me that splitting from the red pill was prudent and necessary. The red pill term has served its use in the past 5 years, but a quick perusal of the red pill subreddit or related blogs show that it's too focused on sex at sacrifice of greater political and cultural issues. It has become an entry-level group for men in their 20s who just started getting laid, but this can only serve as a transitory stage. Once a man has gotten his fill of casual sex and is looking for deeper meaning in his relationships or satisfaction with life, the red pill has few answers besides running dread game on your wife, maintaining a good style to attract young females when older, or the ever-vague work on yourself. Neo-masculinity will aim to fill these gaps by serving men regardless of their age or involvement in the game. It's interesting looking back on this now, because what this calls to mind is the sort of face-off between Destiny and Sneeko and Rolo, in which Rolo put out that tweet where he mentioned the vasectomy, and that went viral or whatever. Rolo has his reasons for that, but the way it snowballed into this thing, it essentially is this old problem of once a man has gotten his fill of casual sex and he's looking for deeper meaning, i.e. something more long-term and meaningful, whether that's starting a family, having a legacy, the red pill doesn't offer a solution for that. And that was the first inklings of that, at least in the present day, were brought out in that debate where Rollo just didn't do well arguing with those guys. You may be confused at all the different men's groups on the internet. Here's a brief summary. MGTOW, men going their own way. This group is for men who do not want to deal with women at all. They have decided to forego having physical or emotional relationships with them, and so here you will find the greatest percentage of voluntary celibates, similar to the herbivore men of Japan. While a few MGTOW do pursue sex, the majority despises game in any attempt to be more attractive to women and have the most amount of hostility towards them. They correctly understand the problems of society, but provide asexual solutions that appeal more to men who place no importance in sexual relationships. Men's rights activists. This group is designed for older men who have already been badly burned by family courts, though many younger men who believe in a literal definition of equality are also members. While MRAs attempt to provide ideological answers for what men should believe, it yields no answers for how a young man should structure his life, and considers ideas of being masculine and fulfilling your biological sex role as oppressive and gynocentric. Many MGTOWs believe this as well. It also does not give advice on having relationships with women. Then you got the PUAs, the pickup artists. PUAs are a collection of businessmen and marketers who share game knowledge to sex-starved men in exchange for large sums of money. And, I don't think Michael Sartain classifies himself as a PUA. Maybe he does, but this is going to be the similar thing here. Their work is almost entirely commercial and aims to teach men how to get laid with the highest quantity of women with no concern for the long-term effect this has on society or their students' well-being. PUAs ignore the cultural reality of why game is needed and sugarcoat the results a typical man can get from it. And now we get to the red pill. So this is Roosh V's description of the red pill after his, split from it. The red pill is a non-commercial version of PUA with cultural observations thrown in. They hold firmly and obsessively onto rigid dogmas such as the alpha-beta male dichotomy to explain all male behavior while basing their truths, quote-unquote, upon a shaky foundation of pop evolution. Because it has no council of elders to guide the ideology, it is now being steered by the mob and watered down or outright trolled by entryists who are blue pill. And this is written like 9 years ago, and it's interestingly prescient. Because that is kind of what happened to the red pill. It got taken over by us. I don't want to call them grifters, but it did. You know what I mean? By essentially the mob. The content that became the most popular is essentially Kool-Aid level stuff. Let's just all yell at the OnlyFans girls and, what's your body count? Let me ask you for the 100th time, what's your body count? You're overweight and you think you're 10 and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, that's what happened to this stuff, So it did get taken over by what Rollo, I've heard call, bread and circus, and people who are essentially blue pill. And that is a true, assertion, because what you saw in the red pill recently is this huge emphasis on becoming a high value man. And essentially what that is just presenting yourself as having these traditional values women look for, you know what I mean? High status, protection, all this kind of stuff. And you saw this kind of handshake for a while between tradcons and the manosphere red pillars, and that's recently been destroyed, especially with Rollo's tweet of the vasectomy thing, because that in itself just went so against family creation, which the tradcons couldn't stomach, and that started a whole thing on Twitter. So this is his whole thing. And another funny thing about this is when you go to the comments, it's interesting because we see a familiar name here. Rollo Tomasi, he left 2 comments. This is 9 years ago. Says, sounds like you're finally looking for a relationship, Roosh, which is interesting. I'm sure he's trolling somewhat, but that almost is an admission that, red pill's not very good at anything long term. The irony is Rollo's married, so it's always like this funny thing. And the second comment is kind of ironic that this still pops up after a minute here. That's the same pop-up we saw in the first article. 18 reasons why you don't get laid, and that was Roosh's sell pitch, and he's basically saying, he's being hypocritical. So anyways, that's a bit of red pill history there. I think we're at a point now where the manosphere has gone mainstream thanks to the help of these Kool-Aid level content, this bread and circus, and that there's just a lot of frustration there that's brought out. And I think it does need to be turned into a political movement in some way in order to enact some legal change, because you can't have legal change unless you have political leaders basically lobbying for it. And since it doesn't have any leadership now, nobody can complain when grifters come around and sell you their self-improvement courses or whatever the heck they're doing. So anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole thing. Hit the like button, leave your comment down below. Darth Sidonius, I appreciate you for leaving very well thought out emails. I know I didn't finish reading the second one, but I do wish you the best of luck, and we're all kind of dealing with this together. Ultimately, I'd like to hope stepping away from this stuff is the answer, and that people can get it figured out. So we'll see you on the next one.